Democratic View. I'm the hostess. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and the show today is going to be a little bit different than anything I've ever done before, because I'm going to talk about myself and my sister, who many of you might know, is Anne Bancroft, and my brother-in-law, who's Mel Brooks, a wonderful, delightful man. And I'm going to talk about our time that we had for 35 years every summer in the closest thing to heaven on earth, and that is Fire Island. And the memories that come back are so very special that one tends to get a little bit filled up with the emotion of the memory of such times at that beach. And today I have with me a man, Karl Grossman, whose column we all read in the press, in both the the Southampton and East Hampton press. Now, Karl had called me because he was going to be doing an interview, or rather an article about the Fire Island, on the Fire Island News, and he interviewed me about my time there. And Karl has many, many years of experience on the island of Long Island in both radio and also in the press, the different press.
And television as well.
And television, and even on my show, as a matter of fact.
A bunch of times.
Yes. So I was telling Karl how we originally got to Fire Island. My sister was working on Broadway in one of the shows. I believe it was Two for the Seesaw. And she said to me, you know, I spent a weekend at Enid Markey's house in Fair Harbor, and I would like to rent a house there so that I can come on the weekend, which began on Sunday night after the last show. She had Monday off and didn't have to be back until Tuesday night. I would like to rent a place there, and you could run it. Well, Fire Island had a rather notorious reputation at that point, and I said, sure, my daughter's only 1 year old, why not? So I hopped a boat, went to Bayshore, hopped the boat, and went on the ferry to Fair Harbor, and looked at a few different houses, and finally settled on a house on Oak Walk, owned by Marty Balson, who is an actor that we've seen walk up the stairs in the movie Psycho. And it was his house, and he was now doing films in Hollywood. And I can tell you that when I finally got on that boat, there were a bunch of guys with me. And I thought, well, it's all right. You know, what do I care? And then when it came time to open up this house and establish this place as a place that we would be spending our weekends at, or actually I would be there all the time and she would be coming on weekends, it was completely different than I expected. It was this entirely family enclave of people who just walked around in bathing suits, and that was it. You know, maybe they had a shirt on sometimes, but most of us, and it was little kids, beaches all around, scallops dancing in the water, an unbelievable experience. And Fire Island was so special, so special. And every time my sister came, we would have these wonderful times. We'd start our day with a dip in the ocean. And that was the way, and then it would be one dip after another. And I remember her making a promise to me that she was going to bring me hot coffee at 5 o'clock every night. I think she did it twice because we were in the water all the time. So, and then we, towards the end of that year, she said, somebody's going to come and visit for dinner. And in walked Mel Brooks. Now, I got to tell you, from the moment I met him, I fell in love with him. He had such a wonderful personality, and he was so sweet. And of course, he became, the partner of her life. And the following year, we went and I rented a house on Birch Walk. And we would do things that you could not believe. We would play cards, and then at about 11 o'clock, when it was really dark and there was no more action on the bay, Mel would get his flashlight, we would get our nets, and we would go onto the dock at Fair Harbor, and we would get the crabs. You shine the light, they're attracted to the light, and you'd scoop them up. And I remember one time we got about, maybe 25 crabs. And being the school teacher that I was, I said, let's not just kill them and put them in the fridge. Let's put them in the sink and let them live at least the night. So we sat down to play some Scrabble, and all of a sudden, we had 25 crabs on the floor. Well, crabs, they bite. And what a job we had getting them up and back into the sink. And that's the kind of wonderful experiences that we had out there. And I remember that first year when he was with us, with Ann and I, and it was such a, you have to go to the store, you have to get the mustard and the butter and the whatever it is you need, and hop on that boat. And after you've parked your car and unloaded your groceries and put them on the boat and then got from the groceries with your little red wagon to your house and all of that. And we finally unpacked and we were sitting on the deck, and Mel said, here we are in Fire Island, stuck. And that's the kind of good times we had. It was absolutely unbelievable. And I remember when we finally, after the third house of renting, we were told about a house that Richard Meyer had, the architect on the house in Lonelyville. And we walked along the bay, passing Reginald Rose's house, and on to look at this house in Lonelyville, which my sister bought. And that was our place for the rest of the time we were there. And, I'm sure that during part of that time, you were also involved in something that went on that was very prominent in our history there, which was the fight for the Robert Moses highway that would have gone from one bridge from Captree to the other bridge, and we would have had a 4-lane highway, which would have probably knocked down that house because that Lonelyville was only this wide. And you remember that fight, don't you?
Yeah, well, that was my first major story as a reporter on Long Island, fighting, campaigning against the highway that Moses wanted to build and crusading for a good alternative, a Fire Island national seashore. And 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signed the bill creating a Fire Island national seashore, and an absolute treasure. I mean, I agree with you totally that this is a treasure of a place. And let me just explain quickly to the viewers that this summer I'm writing a column for the Fire Island News. Great paper. In fact, it was involved in the fight against the road too.
Absolutely.
Way back then. And I thought I should really interview you because I know from being on your shows your connection to Fire Island with your sister and with Mel Brooks. And then after interviewing you, and the piece is running in the Fire Island News. People can read it on the Fire Island News website. It's fireislandnews.com, or just go to my own website. I'll put it up on my own website. It's coming out in a couple of days. Karl Grossman, one word, Karl Grossman, Karl with a K, .com, and people can read it. And after speaking to you, and you're telling me these just terrific stories about the life you and Ann and Mel had on Fire Island, I just thought it would be so important if maybe we could turn the tables on your show, and you could tell the viewers what you told me about how it was on Fire Island. I mean, ultimately you moved to the Hamptons,
Yes.
and so did Ann, and so did Mel.
Yes.
But Fire Island was different, no?
Oh, yes, indeed. I mean, Fire Island was very different. Actually, in those early years, there wasn't even a restaurant in Fair Harbor. There was a little coffee shop type of place where I would, take my only child out to breakfast because I didn't want to disturb Mel, because Mel was always a man who was, sort of frenetic at night, and he wanted to sleep in the morning, and I would take my daughter out, and there was always, we would go and sit in the bay, have breakfast, and then sit by the bay, and she would go in the water, and it was what went on in Fire Island never went on anywhere else, I would say, probably in the United States, because it was the most free place. I have 4 children, and they grew up there, and I knew that my kids could walk out the door of my house in the morning, and I wouldn't see them till dinner, and I knew they were safe. Because how could a kidnapper come here and take them? He'd have to know the boat schedule in order to be able to get off the island with my kid, So it was such a marvelous place for everybody there. And there was no pretension. It was just, as I said, everybody wore a bathing suit and, maybe a shirt, and flip-flops. There was nothing, no jewelry, no nothing, except maybe your wedding band or something like that. And it was a very down-to-earth kind of place. And as I had mentioned to you, when Ann bought the first house, which we called the first house, the second house was actually an empty lot at that time. And then Mel tried to buy that lot because he didn't want people next door to him that, would be looking at him while he slept on the deck, while he was pretending to read and would fall asleep. So then he came out one year and there was a house there. So he bought the house. And at first they rented that house, and then they said, nah, that's going to be the house for me and my family and my oldest sister and her family. That she took July and I took August. But because I was in private school at the time, I was out in March to open the houses, clean the houses, make sure whatever had to be done. I really sort of managed the houses. And then I was also the person who closed the houses because they had to be put away in a certain way. And so we went back and forth all the time between the 2 houses. So there were many meals together. For instance, when my sister was shooting Jesus of Nazareth for PBS, she went to Morocco, and she was, there for about 5 or 6 weeks. And when she came home, we always said we ate nothing but orange food, because she was using cumin and all of the spices of the Arabic communities. And it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. And we had, Uncle Mel would go down. We always call him Uncle Mel, by the way. He's Uncle Mel to everybody in our family. He would go down. He'd fish every night at about 6 o'clock while we were getting the dinner ready, And And then at night, we would play Scrabble or cards. And I remember playing Scrabble one time with him, and I'm a terrible speller. I'm a dyslexic person. And I couldn't spell a certain word. And he said to me, "You're always claiming that you're dyslexic." And I said, "Well, I can't spell this word. I can't spell it." He said, "Are you sure you ain't just dumb?" You know, we would have just marvelous times. I remember one time we were playing this card game, and my daughter came over. She was about 15, 16 years old, and she was reading a comic book and playing this card game, and she won. He had a fit, threw down the cards. "I'm not playing with any more kids anymore while they read comic books," because he'd like to win, obviously. And, you know, the kids all worked at jobs there. They were, you know, at McGuire's waiting tables, or my son was in Kismet opening up clams and cleaning the Kismet Inn at, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning. And they spent their days in the water. And my nephew, Max, their son, who was born in 72 and came right out to the house and as an infant, and spent his time also just running around. And I believe I remember him trying to make rum underneath the house. You know, well, he never succeeded, thank God. But, you know, he's a famous writer now, having written about zombies, the zombie survival book. And it was just you would go from one town to another, and you'd ride your bike, and people would talk to each other, and we were a real community. And the important thing about Fire Island, that is the message we have for here, is that, you know, you have to hold on to those kind of things. You can't let your communities become too changed in what they are, because the freedom that we all had in Fire Island and the beauty of that beach. And by the way, I have been back. We left in '96. I was now an administrator. I no longer had August off. I was working. And my sister wanted to move to the Hamptons, which they had a place in Watermill that they absolutely adored. And they had it until the year after she died. And but those years in Fire Island, of course, were the years that made us all beach bums. I mean, that's why we're here. All of my kids come here all the time, because they are, you know, the water is the big thing. And that's the stuff that we have to also protect, is our beaches. And I was saying, as I went back to Fire Island, I was amazed at how wonderful the beach still was. Wide, sugar for sand, and people still just sitting around talking. You know, everybody still with their wagons and their bikes, in their bathing suits, maybe a little schmata to cover up against the sun, sitting on their beach chairs, and they turn their beach chairs to face the sun. And it had not changed. It was as unpretentious as it was in those days. And of course now, it's a national seashore, thanks to Stuart Udall. And they don't even allow any riding of cars, even by the full-time residents. Mm-hmm. You know, they have to go through the middle of the island. And off-season, they're allowed a little bit of travel. And of course, there's not many people who live there year-round, because it is, you know, quite a lot of wind and high seas. And so their beach is really much more protected in a way because you don't have those deep ruts caused by cars. And so, but to walk along that shore and see those scallops, and you'd get a bushel of scallops to get a pound after you clean them. This was before brown tide. I'm talking about the 60s. And to go and clam, and we would get enormous amounts of clams. I mean, you could go, I was a champion clammer. I would just go along and like this and just put these clams, we'd put them on top of a little float that you have, and you'd have a bushel before in a half hour, if that's how many clams there were. Unfortunately, that no longer exists in Great South Bay. But another thing I had mentioned too was that later on, when the children were a little bit older and they were off at school and things like that, my sister and I would go every morning for a swim. We would swim from the Doomwood float to the Doomwood dock, back and forth, and actually even took swimming lessons one year. And one time, after our swim in the bay, we decided to go to the ocean. And the ocean was a little bit rough that morning, and fortunately at the Doomwood beach, there was a lifeguard, and I didn't go in that way. I went in, but I got out really quick. And she went in a little bit too far, and she was looking at me, and I knew that look. It's that give my love to mama look, because I may not get out. And I had to call the lifeguards to come and save her. And actually, I've often said I've almost drowned 4 times in Fire Island myself, which is why I swim touching the ground when I swim in the bay. But it was an absolutely free, wonderful time. And another experience of almost drowning was I put her on the boat one day on a Sunday. She was going to go do a movie in London at the time. And I went back to and Mel was working and he wasn't there. And I went back to the ocean, and the ocean was flat as can be. And I thought, well, I might as well go in the water, Here I am, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, I might as well go in the water. And I went into the water, and there's nobody on the beach, and Lonelyville had no lifeguard. And I'm swimming away, and all of a sudden I look up, and I am so far out that, oh my God, I know I am at least 3 or 4 times my 5'9" body out in the depth. And I waved to a friend out on the beach, and she waved back. And I thought, oh my God, what do they always say, swim by a lifeguard when you swim alone? And I had to sort of not panic and do my little side stroke and get myself back up to the shore. But those are really unbelievable moments of great happiness and wonderful memories.
Inch for inch, there's probably as many celebrities on Fire Island.
Oh, yes.
As there, you mentioned Reginald Rose, the writer, way back.
Oh, God.
When I did that first
Days
story.
of Wine and Roses.
Yeah, I interviewed him, so articulate like yourself. But there's not the celebrity scene that you have here in the Hamptons.
No.
Why is that, you think?
I just don't think people care about it. There is a feeling on Fire Island that is very different than anything you will ever have anywhere else. It is just, there's nothing that matters. All that matters is can you get in the ocean today? What's the air like? And look at the bird. And it's very, very different. I mean, I can name you 1,000 people that I have met there. Ellen Burstyn was there. Steve Heller would come, the guy from the actor studio, who used to come all the time to us, Susan Strasberg and her father, they would come all the time to our house. We would have, chats with them and all that kind. But nobody cared. Just everybody walked around. I guess maybe because we were all in bathing suits.
It's a bit swimsuit democracy, eh? Barefoot democracy.
I guess that must have. Well, the title of B. Garfinkel's column was "Barefoots and Wagons," and that's really what it was about.
Yeah, B. Garfield, she was editor of
Yes.
of the Fire Island News for many years. It was a time, well, how could I put it, in Lonelyville of, well, great productivity for you in education,
Yes.
for your sister Anne in acting. I mean, The Graduate really became a real vehicle for her. And then
I read Blazing Saddles in script form there.
Really?
In my bedroom in Fire Island, as well as the producers. Years earlier, I read that in script form as well, in that bedroom at night. And I remember when I was reading Blazing Saddles saying, "Oh my God, this is going to be so hysterically funny." And anyway, I just would like to remind people that we must take care of the place we are in right now, so that it can remain as wonderful as Fire Island has remained over the years. And that's very important.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can talk about the differences between Fire Island and the Hamptons, but there's similarities too. This is also a beautiful place, which
Indeed.
has to be preserved.
Thank you so much. It was so much
Our
fun to
pleasure,
talk
dear.
about my wonderful life in Fire Island.
Oh, yeah.
It was unbelievable.